Welcome to my garden, the GinGee GoodEarth program. Viking, take 4. There's 8 parts, and this is part 4. We're going to read the book on the Vikings, June 21st. And we're going to go ahead and just get started. Now this did not suit Leif at all, to sail south in safety in the company of a lowing herd of cattle seemed a very dull way for a boy who owned a dagger all of his own to leave his home. So Leif sought out Brandon. While they were hallooed and the cows to drive them out into the water where they could be hoisted aboard the ship, the 2 boys planned to vanish. It should not be a hard matter to hide until the ship should have cast off and be on her way. And again, Eric's wife and younger children were put on a ship with the horses and the cattle, and the ship was to arrive at a local village while Leif and Brandon helped put the animals on board, but then they hid themselves so that they could participate with Leif's father, Eric, on this adventure. They climbed aboard accordingly and jumped about the waist of the vessel or ship. At last, Harkin, in charge of loading the cattle, told them sternly to get out of their way and anywhere they wanted, in the name of the gods Thor and Odin. But out of the way, then they slipped down into the water over the stern of the ship and swam and waded ashore behind a tongue of rock that ran into the bay. Dripping wet, they made their way back into the barnyard and hid under a pile of hay in one of the stables. Eric was not pleased at all when the ship, safely beating out into deep water with slaves and the oars, the boys appeared. "You pair of imps," he cried. "Your mother will think you're lost, Leif." "Oh, we left word," said Leif. "Brandon's little sister knows we're with you. She'll tell Mother." "So I have to look after you," said Eric. "You're a nuisance. We have to ride hard." "Well, look after ourselves, and we can ride hard, can't we, Brandon?" Brandon nodded vehemently. "Come then, up with you," said Eric, making the best of things. The boys mounted 2 shaggy ponies in the center of the cavalcade. They started off. It was too long a trip for the horses to be galloped, and the band of armed men and 2 wet boys rode at a bone-shaking jog-trot over the rough country. As soon as they were a far distance from the farm, Eric struck inland away from the road they would be expected to follow. In the northern country, right up under the Arctic Circle, the sun hardly set, and it was not until 10 at night they halted. Up to the time they had stopped only to change horses or chew a bit of smoked meat. They were in wild country, and the mountains of the northwest peninsula of Iceland were still to their north. The first night they camped in the ruins of a deserted farmhouse which had been burned down to its foundation stones. Eric looked about it grimly, thinking of what might await the home he had left behind. But he wasted little time on regret, for what he could not help, and soon, wrapped in his cloak, he slept beside the two exhausted boys. Next day Leif could hardly stay awake in his saddle. His knees ached from gripping his pony. His teeth jolted together. He was sore all over. Brandon, too, was white under the tan of his skin. But the boys knew they must not delay the men in their push to safety out of this district. Here Eric's enemies could now attack him without fear, since he was protected by no law. I must stay awake, Leif thought. I must stay awake. He imagined himself pitching from his pony under the hoofs of the horses behind him, and he did not like the thought. Brandon, he gasped. Brandon, are you sleepy? Yes, said Brandon, between his set teeth. We must talk to stay awake, said Leif. What shall we talk about? Let's tell stories, said Leif. I'll tell you about the Johnsburg Vikings, as Bajanari told me. So, his sentences broken into short phrases by the jolting of their ride, he began the great saga of the band of men who ravaged the shores of the Baltic and set up a city where no woman could set a foot, and where all the companions were sworn blood brothers. Then Brandon began, and through the afternoon he told Leif of the adventurers of the St. Brandon for whom he was named. St. Brandon had set sail into the western sea in a skin boat, or a coracle, such as the Irish still used. He had found fabulous countries, pillars of crystal set in the ocean, and an island that smoked and hurled fire out at the saint and his friends. Late in the afternoon, Eric gave the word to swing south around the head of the bay. The cavalcade rode down out of the protected hills. The men shook themselves alert and grasped their spears more tightly. When Leif saw his father loosen his sword in his sheath, he too put his hand on his dagger. Eric stood up in his stirrups and peered ahead. Do you see that line of hills? He asked. Yes, said Leif. We are safe when we get there. At the foot runs a stream which marks the boundary of this northwest district, where I am an outlaw. Across the river I am again a man under the protection of the law. So ride well now, boys, and we shall sleep in safety tonight. Assuming, said Bajanari, riding behind them, that there is no one waiting at the ford to give us too warm a farewell. Eric frowned. Is there no other ford? This late in the summer the river is low. Where else can we cross, Bajanari? You know this country. Bajanari reined up and thought. We can try, he said. We may have to swim the horses, but the river will be low. We should be able to do it now, if we ever can. We must bear to the left, Eric, and look for a cairn of stones, making a burial mound. That is the place. Eric gave the order, and the weary horses were spurred in the new direction. Everyone rode in silence now, and as it grew later, a faint slow tusk flooded the landscape. There, said Bajanari in a whisper, looking up. The boys saw a pile of stones heaped on top of a little hill lock. This is the place. Down to the river, said Eric. Ride now, and we must swim for it. Slip off your pony, Leif, and you, Brandon, and swim beside him with your hand on the bridle. Quickly the men plunged down toward the stream. Leif, his heart pounding, thought that nothing had ever looked as sweet as the opposite bank. fringed with low scrub and willow trees. The first man had all but reached the river when there was the twang of a bowstring, and an arrow flew past him into the water. "Stand!" cried a voice, and Leif saw two men on horseback ride from behind him the little mound. "Eric the Red, you will pay for your bloody deeds," cried the foremost of the men. And here's the picture of swiftly Eric turned, and with the tremendous sweep of his arm hurled his spear clear across the stream. And there's a picture of the horse and his spear. And then we also see the picture of Leif and Brandon and the other men in the cavalcade, and also Bajanari. And they are very close to crossing the stream. I see the horse's hooves are in the water. The other lifted the horn to his lips and started to blow a blast. He never finished it. Quick as lightning, Bajanari's spear flew through the air and buried itself in his breast. The man coughed, threw up in the hand which held the horn, and fell backward off his horse. "Into the water," cried Eric in a greater voice, and with the flat of his drawn sword he beat Leif's pony on the flank, so that the frightened beast leaped down the bank into the stream. The man who left spurred his rearing horse behind the mound, and they heard him shout, come up, they are trying to cross here." "Yes, and we'll do more than try," cried Eric. They left most of their men to guard the main ford. "These are our only two watchers. Steady, men, we'll make it." But the ground was already thundering under the hooves of horses. Leif, peering back over his shoulder as his pony breasted the current of the river, saw a troop of men tearing up the bank, 2 or 3 times as many as Eric's men. "Swim!" cried Eric. "Swim for it!" With the last of his band he spurred into the stream and slipped from his horse's back. When the other horsemen reached the mound, Eric and his men were already finding footing on the opposite bank. "Ride!" cried out Eric. "Though they will not dare to cross after us, but their arrows can reach us here, and we cannot shoot back with wet bowstrings. Ride! The dusk is growing, and they will not see their marks for long." Leif scrambled onto his pony, and catching a long willow twig, he used it for a whip. Brandon was beside him, crying out to his pony in a strange tongue that Leif could not understand. "Why, it must be Irish Brandon is talking," Leif thought. "I must get him to teach me Irish," as if it had nothing else in the world to do but plan what he would like to study. Over Leif's head an arrow rushed with a sound like a tearing cloth and buried itself in the flank of a riderless horse. The horse screamed and ran frantically ahead, and Leif heard his father behind him, cursing and calling onto the Norse god Thor for help. Swiftly Eric turned, and with a tremendous sweep of his arm hurled his spear clear across the stream into the thick of the men clustered by the bank. Then suddenly it was all over. Bajanari in the lead had found a small valley running up into the hills away from the river, and into this the men poured, thundered around a bend, and were safe from their enemies and arrows. Here they drew rein for a moment, and all that was to be heard was the sobbing breath of men and horses, and Eric's voice, deep and soft, calling out the Norse god Thor. "Hunted," he was saying, "hunted like rabbits. Never, never will I be hunted again. I call Thor to witness. I have never before run from a foe. Never will I run and hunted like a rabbit again. He drew a long breath between his teeth. His hand gripped his sword as if to raise it for a blow. Then he seemed to come to himself, slipped the sword back into its sheath, and said, "Bajanari, how do we get through these hills? We must sleep far south of here, lest some of our friends try to slip over the river in the darkness and take back a dead man or two, whom they can say that they killed before we reached safety." "This way, I think," said Bajanari, and in the dusk they rode after him. So we'll continue that on that just finished up chapter 10, and our next chapter on the book on the Vikings is chapter 11, and I wanted to go over a miniature book. It's called The Wit and Wisdom of John F. Kennedy, and I'm going to read the section on freedom. So you enjoy the picture show, and I'll get that closer. Okay, on freedom. Ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. January 20th, 1961. In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defeating freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country in all who serve it, and the glow from that fire can truly light the world. January 20th, 1961. It is the fate of this generation to live with a struggle we did not start, in a world we did not make, but the pressures of life are not always distributed by choice, and while no nation has ever faced such a challenge, no nation has ever been so ready to seize the burden and the glory of freedom. January 11th, 1962. It's a vital business, the running of a democracy, and it's important that all of us register and vote for the party of our choice. I am supporting the party of my choice, and I intend to vote in the November elections. August 28th, 1962. We in this country, in this generation, are by destiny rather than choice, the watchmen on the walls of the world of freedom. We ask, therefore, that we may be worthy of a power and responsibility, that we may exercise our strength with its wisdom and restraint, and that we may achieve in our time and for all time the ancient vision of peace on earth, goodwill toward men, to have been delivered November 22nd, 1963. I have found that people everywhere, in spite of occasional disappointments, look to us, not to our wealth or power, but to the splendor of our ideas. For our nation is commissioned by history to be either an observer of freedom, failure, or cause of its success. Our overriding obligation in the months ahead is to fulfill the world's hopes by fulfilling our own faith. January 11th, 1962. Our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right, not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom here in this hemisphere, and we hope around the world. God willing, that goal will be achieved October 22nd, 1962. I believe in human dignity as the source of national purpose, and human liberty as the source of national action. the human heart as the source of national compassion, and in the human mind as the source of our invention and our ideas. Together let us build sturdy mansions of freedom, mansions that all the world can admire and copy, but that no tyrant can ever enter. July 1st, 1963. The wave of the future is not the conquest of the world by a single dogmatic creed, but the liberation, the diverse energies of free nations and free men. March 23, 1962. We are Americans. That is a proud boast. That is a great privilege to be a citizen of the United States, and we must meet our responsibilities. We stand for freedom. That is our conviction for ourselves. That is our only commitment to others. No friend, no neutral, no adversary should think otherwise. We are not against any man or any nation or any system except as it is hostile to freedom. Our historic task in this embattled age is not merely to defend freedom, it is to extend its writ and strengthen its covenant. We still have some time, and I promised that I would give recipes from the Stouffer's restaurant catalog book. And I said I would go over some canopy cheese mixtures, dip and eat. So the first one is horseradish cream cheese. So you need 4 3-ounce packages of cream cheese, 3/4 teaspoon of Worcester sauce, 3/4 teaspoon of onion chopped very fine, 3 tablespoons of horseradish prepared, 1/2 cup of half and half cream. Mix that all together, and it serves about 12 people. Serve with pretzels, crackers, Ritz crackers, Triscuits, and the such. The other recipe for the canopy cheese mixture is avocado cream cheese. 8 ounces of cream cheese, 8 ounces of mashed fine avocado, 1.5 teaspoons of lemon juice, 1.5 teaspoons of onion juice, 3/4 teaspoon of salt. The next one is Smithfield ham, chive, and cream cheese. So it takes 12 ounces of cream cheese, which is 4 3-ounce packages, 1 teaspoon of fresh chives, cut in very fine pieces, 2 tablespoons of deviled Smithfield ham, a 1/2 cup of half and half. It could be any type of ham that you enjoy. Roquefort cream cheese, 6 ounces of cream cheese, 8 ounces of blue cheese, 2 teaspoons of lemon juice, a 1/4 cup of onion chopped fine, a 1/2 cup of half and half cream, and 3/4 teaspoons of salt. Mix the cream cheese until soft and creamy. Combine with seasonings. Add the half and half cream gradually and mix thoroughly. These mixtures should be very soft for dipping consistency. Keep refrigerated until used for service. Again, it can be served with crisp potato chips, wheat thins, Ritz crackers, Triscuits, cheese Ritz, rye crisp, soya crackers, butter wafers. And then decorate them with sliced cucumbers and chives and dill, and even olives chopped with the pimento in the center. Make it more colorful. Enjoy for the summer hot evenings. I have a calling card, which okay, that was Joe Pye weed, but let's try to get the calling card. I don't know if you could see that calling card I have there. And every program for the GinGee GoodEarth show, I'll put a new calling card on the video so that you can enjoy them. And basically, calling cards were somewhat like a business card of today's time. And if you went visiting a business, or if you went visiting friends and neighbors, and you wanted to be invited back for tea or meet for a luncheon tea, you would leave your calling card, and that would have your name and your phone number and address, so that you would leave that at the front door table in a calling card dish, so that they could, write you a letter and invite you to an event or a birthday party. But calling cards was very much a part of the Victorian era, and today we use business cards in the same type of fashion. Without further ado, I wish you a great day, and enjoy the picture show. I will have a picture show on Viking Museum historic pieces in the near future, and I'll do a panorama scan of my set here, and I encourage those who would like to entertain through the YouTube video programming that you could follow basically my directionals and put on a story time of your own. Have a great day.